Hello there, friends. My name's Annette with Sunbeam Fabric Art. Welcome to my channel. Not too long ago, I finished around 27 quilts mostly for charity. I had a lot of strips left over from doing the backing and trimming off the edges around the quilts. I don't know about you, but I think that string quilts are one of the most beautiful quilts that you can make. I started sorting out the strips by length on my floor. That didn't work out too well, so eventually I just decided to sort them right on my table. Once I have them sorted out into lengths, I start sewing them together with the longest length first. Now, the reason I start with the longest first is because if I sew one that's long and the next one, I'm sewing it to one that's also long, but maybe they're 10-12 inches difference, I can cut off that 10-12 inches and use it in a shorter length stack. If you've been watching my channel, you may recognize a couple of borders I've done in the past. One of those was a 4-patch border that I made. That was really pretty, but I had a long strip of that left over that I didn't use. I always think of these projects in terms of rounds, and when you're sewing one piece to one piece, that's round one, and round one always takes the longest. You will spend as much time doing the rest of the rounds, no matter how many there are, as you took doing round one. Well, let's skip to the end of round one. Round one is kind of a hassle because it takes so long, but here you see I'm separating all my chains, and I kept chaining this. I did not stop, I did not break thread. When I changed the bobbin, I just kept everything attached. Since I stitched these in length order, the first chain I break is the shortest length, and then I'm going to end up with the top of the stack being the longest length. Then I can start sewing 2 strips together with 2 other strips, again by length. I do not press between my rounds. You could if you wanted to. You could also trim the sides of your strips. I do not. I leave the jagged edges, and if they don't look like they're matching up, I just sew an extra wide seam to make up for that. I did not skip any of round 2 here, but you can see it took a lot less time than round 1. And it's really fun once you get to rounds 3 and subsequent rounds, you're getting something that really looks like some nice, beautiful fabric. Now, one thing I will note here is that certain lengths of my strips were certain colors. For example, my longer strips tended to be blues and greens. Some of my medium strips, I had a lot of white, and some of my shorter strips, I had some reds and Christmas colors. Now, towards the end of my rounds, I could not chain anymore. You see that big pile piling up on my table. It will no longer fit down between the wall and my table. So on subsequent rounds, I just did not chain. I would just do one piece at a time and toss it down on the floor, do another piece, toss it down on the floor, and then for the next round, I would just pick up off the stack on my floor. And once I got to the stage where I was picking them up off the floor, I stopped and added a piece. stopped, added a piece, so there was no more chaining. I was just creating the one long piece. And here I am at the very end of stitching these pieces together, and I'm going to take you through a tour of my home so you can see just how long this piece ended up. Wow, I really do love those greens and blues at the end. Well, now it's time to press this, and I pressed the wrong side of the fabric. Once it was all nice and pressed, I decided to start cutting out 12.5-inch squares from my fabric. Now this is a 12.5-inch ruler, and it does have a diagonal line, so I'm able to line up that diagonal line with my strips and then cut out around my square to get my 12.5-inch block. On my second block, I decided it was a little too difficult to get my rotary cutter around at the beginning, so first I did a rough cut around the edges, and then I did my rotary cutter after that. After about the fourth block, I'd had enough of trying to manipulate this long piece of fabric in my sewing space, which is very, very small. So you can see here, I laid everything out on the floor, and I just started using my rotary cutter to cut out a rough 12.5-inch to 13-inch square. Then I took those rough cuts back to my small sewing space and did the finishing of the trimming. And here is your public service announcement. Change your rotary blade once in a while. With all my blocks trimmed, it's time to put 4 blocks together to make a giant block. And there's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can have them all going the same way if you want to, but I am going to be making these diamonds, and then as they join together, they'll make a secondary diamond. I kept laying out blocks on top of this pattern, and here you see my stacks of blocks ready to sew together. I'm going to start by sewing the top 2 blocks together and then the bottom 2 blocks together. Then we'll join those to make a giant block. Well, I ended up with a total of 7 giant blocks. I'm going to save one for some other project, and to make my quilt, I'm going to make it 2 giant blocks wide and 3 giant blocks long. That makes the finished size of this quilt about 48 inches by 72 inches. Here is a look at that finished string quilt. I just love this. I think it's beautiful. I don't even feel like it needs a border. It's just so pretty. I cannot wait to finish it and gift it to someone. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I do hope to see you back again real soon.